What's up, people? I'm Shaggy the Opinionated Hippie, and I am officially starting my sort of dive into the Jethro Tull live release rabbit hole. I recently did their studio albums, and part of my doing their studio albums when I did was it was sparked by the release of Bursting Out, the Inflated Edition. I think the Inflated Edition, I think that's what it was called. But it's essentially a re-release and a remix of their 1978. It's from 78. I think it actually came out in 78 also. Live album Bursting Out, which is that rare beast that it's a 70s live album that actually sounds really good. It's not like just overwhelmed by audience noise or poor audio or thin audio. It's a really decent live album. It sounds fantastic. It's arguably one of the best live albums to come out of the 70s. And now it's been remixed by Steven Wilson with a bonus disc thrown in of a concert that had also been released, I've discovered, Madison Square Garden 1978. That's the third disc of here. This is on the Heavy Horses tour. So you get a lot of Heavy Horses material, which I like. And I'm really excited because I know there's a bunch of live albums, not as many as Yes, but there's a number of live albums that they've released. And I'm really hoping that some of these are from the 70s that are from other tours or even from the early 80s, because I really liked hearing these Heavy Horses songs live. Plus it's a mix of like pretty much a track from almost every album prior to this. Not every album is. I don't think there's a Passion Play song, unfortunately. I think that there's nothing. I think everything else is maybe covered. Maybe not this was, but a really fantastic album. A really fantastic set list for this show. And the original release, Bursting Out, it was from their 78 European tour, so it's not an actual concerts. It's songs from a variety of concerts, but the set list is very reflective of what they would play normally, so it feels like an actual concert. And you don't get that, like, you don't get fade outs of audience noise. These songs aren't isolated tracks. It feels like a live show. It's an awesome live album. And one thing Jethro Tull does that a lot of prog bands do is, because their songs are so long, they're not playing full versions of their songs. You know, they're editing them down in some fashion. It still feels like a complete song. And if you weren't familiar with the songs, you wouldn't think that there was anything like truncated about them. You wouldn't feel like, oh, that felt like it was only half a song. They do a good job of playing them. And in this set list, at least for the original Bursting Out, you got a number of songs which are shortened. No Lullaby is shortened. A New Day Yesterday is kind of a shortened, streamlined version. Living in the Past on this new release. Heavy Horses on the new release. Though there is a Heavy Horses from the soundcheck that is the full, like, 8-minute Heavy Horses. Songs from the Wood. Criminally shortened, but I'd rather hear a criminally shortened song from the Wood than none at all. What else? Minstrel in the Gallery is shortened. That's maybe the one that kind of hurts the most, I think. But it's still good to hear. And then Thick as a Brick is shortened. But still, you get more music because they're playing the shortened versions of these. So what do you get in this absolutely fantastic live album? It opens up with No Lullaby, the original one and the new release. And they have this sort of like instrumental sort of like, let's jam out before we go into that opening guitar riff and into the song proper. Awesome opener. Great song. I love that. I like just personally when a band opens up with like a song from their current album and they just deliver the goods. Like, hey, we know you're coming to these shows because of old albums. It's very seldom because of the newest album. It seems, at least as bands get older and become, established. But opening up with No Lullaby, it's a fantastic version. One of my favorite songs from Jethro Tull. Great opening song. Then they go into an absolutely hard rock and Sweet Dream, a single release only, right? Not on an official studio album. Absolutely just obliterating it. Just this 1-2 punch of an opener. Like, bar is just, the band is ridiculous. Sounds amazing. We get Skating Away on the Thin Ice, Jack and the Green, One Brown Mouse. On this release, the original does not have this, but the new release has Heavy Horses. Then we get A New Day Yesterday, which is kind of a little more streamlined, a little more like hard rock, sleek kind of metal attack, like a little more forceful and less like folk rock airy as the original, though that's still a hard hitting song. It's even a little more streamlined. That goes into like the flute solo part, in which we get a little God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen. We get a little beret in there. That goes on the new release, the 3 CD set. There's a Living in the Past. It's a short little sort of like the conclusion to the flute solo. Then we get the Songs from the Wood, which unfortunately is a little bit shorter than it should be. On the Madison Square Garden show, there's a Songs from the Wood, but they put a little P-Brock jam before they start it. So that's actually really cool. That P-Brock jam is not in this Bursting Out mix. And that's the end of the first disc as far as the actual show goes. You get several sound check songs at the end of the first disc. A No Lullaby sound check, a Sweet Dream sound check, which are pretty similar to the original, to the ones that are actually played live. But then you get the full Heavy Horses. You get this light, airy, jazzy instrumental called Botanic Man, which I think has since been released on one of the Steven Wilson remixes of Heavy Horses. I think it was on Heavy Horses. And then we get an instrumental version of Four Wheel Drive, 4WD, which wouldn't be released for a couple more years. But it's a nice instrumental version that I think fades out at the end. Like maybe there's something more exciting there that they're doing. But some really good choices for sound check recordings. Disc 2 opens up with Thick as a Brick. It's about a 12-minute version. You get like the opening part, the acoustic part. Then we go into the Poet and the Painter, which is kind of the jammy center of this. And then we go into the I Came Down from the Upper Class part towards the end. From the Upper Class, we get a little section of that. And then we jump to the end of part 2 for the ending of the song. A really nice, healthy 12 minutes of Thick as a Brick that sound fantastic. And that Poet and the Painter part in the middle is just epic. I wish there was a world in which Jethro Tull broke up this song and would drop like the first 2 parts, and then later in the show drop just the Poet and the Painter, and then maybe later in the show drop just From the Upper Class. Like these songs are standalone songs. It would have been neat to have Thick as a Brick sort of pop up randomly throughout shows, the different parts of it. Then we get Hunting Girl, fantastic. Absolutely love hearing that song. Just such a great song. Sounds so good. Too Old to Rock and Roll. Love that riff. Just great riff. Conundrum, which is like a live instrumental. Usually there's a drum solo that usually drops in here, like a nice jammy thing. I don't think there's any flute in here whatsoever. It sounds like this is a part where Anderson leaves the stage and takes a break. We get the abbreviated Minstrel in the Gallery. They kind of cut the acoustic part. They kind of mess around with like some of the really cool runs of the electric part. It's still really nice to hear, but this is the one I think suffers the most from being shortened, just mainly because of the parts they choose to leave out, but I still enjoy it. And then we get the end of the show in which they're just dropping Aqualung tracks like crazy. We get a fantastic Cross-Eyed Mary. Love that song. Doesn't sound as absolutely mind-blowing as the studio track. That organ sound on the studio track is ridiculous. We get Quatrain, which is like a little instrumental jig that sets up Aqualung. Never been a fan of Aqualung live. This is the only album I've heard, but I've seen Jethro Tull a number of times, and for some reason the song just doesn't connect with me live, except for when we get to the guitar solo and Martin Barr gets to like flex his muscles and kind of experiment a little. That's always the highlight, I think, of an Aqualung live, and it is again here. And then we get a Locomotive Breath with a nice jammy intro. And then they close the show with something called Dam Busters March, which is the soundtrack to like a 1955 British war film, 1954, somewhere around there. A nice little instrumental number. And then there's sound check recordings at the end of disc 2 on the new release, the Inflated Edition. Sound check recordings of Conundrum, Quatrain, and Dam Busters March. So whether or not you get the old version that doesn't have the Living in the Past and the Heavy Horses or the sound check stuff, or this news version, this is a hit it out of the ballpark live album. The band is ridiculously tight. Just listening to the sound check of like Heavy Horses and to hear them like pull off all those crazy changes and all that, just the randomness of that, to hear them do that as a sound check, knowing that this is a live band that's locked in, absolutely fantastic. I think that's one of the things that makes this album and this performance so good is while the music is incredibly complex at time and there's these just crazy prog passages, the band is locked in. Like they sound like Yes, like a rock band. You know, they sound like Yes, I think is the best example of a band who just plays full speed ahead, these crazy changes of a prog band, but like makes it sound like you're in a rock club. Jethro Tull makes you feel like you're in a rock club, even though you're seeing these grand prog things, ideas, music. Disc 3 is the Madison Square Garden show. I don't know if it's a complete show. I've seen the set list floating around, but it opens up with like a Sweet Dream sort of coming out on the stage fanfare. They go into Sweet Dream. One Brown Mouse is next. That if this is the actual order of the concert, I do think that like No Lullaby, Sweet Dream 1-2 combo is a little more effective than just the Sweet Dream and then kind of dropping down to a One Brown Mouse. Interesting choice. Doesn't quite flow as well, but still nice to hear. Then we get the Heavy Horses, fantastic. A Thick as a Brick, pretty much the same arrangement as the one on the official release. We're on the bonus disc now. A No Lullaby, drop it here instead of opening. We get the flute solo. We get the song from the Wood with the P-Brock opening. We get a quatrain, Aqualung, Locomotive Breath, the Dam Busters March. We get an instrumental track called A Single Man, which had not been released on an album. I do think it also might have been also released on one of the Steven Wilson remixes. I'm not sure. But it's this instrumental that pretty much just features Martin Barre. There's a drum solo in the middle that's neither too long nor too short. It's like the perfect length drum solo. It's a really good song, and it's a really good... It's sort of the conundrum of this show. Instead of the conundrum happening, they're dropping a single man. And I really good. Kind of one of the reasons, like the Heavy Horses, the single man, one of the things that really makes the inflated edition, I think, a very worthwhile purchase. Then we get a Too Old to Rock and Roll. We get something that doesn't really work for me. We get a really short version of My God. It's like 3 minutes. There's not an acoustic instrument in sight. You're missing the absolute just patient ominousity. The weird kind of moody, dark vibes of that opening are not there. And then they run through just a whole bunch of different parts. The My God doesn't work. It's kind of neat that they throw it at the end and it's not like a centerpiece of a show, but it's interesting to hear. But I can say, you know, I'd rather them just this is one song. Let's take the time and just do My God. And then Across I'd Marry to close. But yeah, you also have a bunch of DVDs, remixes on the new release. I think it's a 3 CD, 3 DVD release. Yeah. But yeah, it's this is a great live album. And to have it come from the 70s, even the 70s version prior to being remixed was is a fascinating listen. But I'm going to rank all these live things. This obviously is number one at this point, and I will be surprised if it doesn't end up as number one when I'm done with it, but I'm hoping Jethro Tull surprises me and drops some better live albums. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to this journey. I sort of relit the Jethro Tull passion fire under me recently listening to these albums. So yeah, all right. That's all I got. Just wanted to rant and rave about this awesome release. I think both versions are worth getting. It's absolutely fantastic. But yeah, that's all I got. Thanks for watching. And another Jethro Tull live album in about a week. All right. Peace. Thanks for watching. Talk to you later.